What's up, guys? It's Eric, Xander, and Kenneth from Rare Candy, and today we're going to be counting down our top 10 favorite cards from the new set Forbidden Light. So it's kind of exciting. It's our first video we've officially done all together. We did actually post an announcement video not too long ago announcing these guys joining me here on the channel, so definitely go check that out if you have not already done so. And also, too, if you want to hear more about the other cards from Forbidden Light, we actually have a set review posted that's pretty in-depth as well. But like I said, today we're just talking about our top 10 favorites from the set, and definitely a lot of cool things that are definitely worth going over here. And before we get too deep into the actual list itself, just want to say real quick, we are going to be excluding reprints from the set. So what I mean by that is cards like the Judge card that is already in the existing format won't be eligible for this list, but the alternate type reprints are going to still be allowed. For example, like the alternate water type Palkia GX or the alternate fighting type Garchomp, just as a few examples. But before we get to the number 10 spot, we actually have an honorable mention that we're going to go over as well, and that is going to be Diantha.
Yeah, Diantha's great. Pokemon's been printing a lot of the, each supporter they're printing, each type has a supporter that benefits it, and Diantha's the one for Fairy. And I think the two main obvious decks for it are, Gardevoir and Sylveon. Gardevoir, it's kind of just a free teammates. If your Gardevoir gets knocked out, you just go, okay, get Rare Candy and Gardevoir out of my discard pile, or if you have one of them in your hand, you just get an energy to attack or just whatever you need. And I don't think it'll see a ton of play because of a lack of Versus Seeker in this format, but with things like Tapu Lele GX, that could definitely help it out a lot. Sylveon decks, it also can help out as well. I didn't think it would at first, but sometimes you know that your active is going to die, and so if you search for Diantha, you kind of Magical Ribbon for 4 cards, knowing that you're going to be able to get 2 from your discard pile plus the 2 that you search for. So I think the card's going to be really interesting. I do think that without Versus Seeker, the card's going to struggle a little bit to find a good, solid home, so I don't really know how much play it'll see within Standard. But the card, just out of the gates, pretty solid. Just a solid card, not really worth top 10, but it's definitely going to be something to think about whenever you're running Fairy-type Pokemon.
Yeah, I kind of echo those same sentiments. Right now in standard format, without Versus Seeker, a lot of these tech supporters and one-ofs that we've seen in the past just aren't as nearly effective unless you're playing some sort of Zoroark based deck, since you typically play Puzzles of Time and ways to actually reuse your supporters. But like in the case of Sylveon, you have Lusamine to reuse it if you do choose to, which is kind of nice. And since you kind of know, like Xander says, when your Sylveon's going to get knocked out, you can typically Magical Ribbon like a turn in advance to kind of make sure you have the Diantha ready to go, which is kind of nice. Another deck you didn't mention that I think it actually has potential in is Xerneas variants. That's actually, I think, I'm a little bit more optimistic personally. Right now at the time of filming, I have not tested Diantha in any decks yet, so this is kind of speculation from my part, but I'm more excited for Xerneas variants just because Xerneas decks, your attackers only give up 1 prize each, so that means you have more turns inherently to potentially use Diantha, whereas in maybe like a Gardevoir deck, you only really have a couple of turns in particular that give you a window to use the card. So I think Xerneas variants are ones that I would be personally looking at trying Diantha in as well. Being able to get back things like EXP shares or max elixirs or whatever it might be to keep your board state going.
Getting back double colorless also matters a lot because Livestream counts all energies. So with the amount of hand spammers that are seeing play right now, Livestream it can be lowered really fast when they knock out your active and they enhance hammer, but you can kind of bring that back with Diantha.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of really cool plays that we could see, and of course in the expanded format we do have access to Versus Seeker, so that does make the card inherently a little bit more playable in that format as well. Kenneth, how do you feel about the card?
I mean, honestly, I don't know. It's certainly interesting, but it's probably a card that I actually exclude from a lot of these decks. I honestly just don't think that Gardevoir honestly needs it. Sylveon, you already have puzzles and things like that, and you really don't want to be knocked out as Sylveon. I don't know. I just feel like with Sylveon and Gardevoir, it's just not necessary. You can just probably play a better supporter during your turn.
Yeah, it almost feels kind of like a 61st card in some situations. Yeah.
It's like a 65th or 66th card. There are a few more cards that I'd rather play in a Gardevoir list than this. And I think an expanded teammates is just better, but it's still like a really neat card. There's going to be something that makes this card good eventually.
Definitely so. I think it's funny too. We're saying it's like a 61st card, and it's our 11th card of the top 10.
Yeah, so
I think that perfectly speaks to the nature of the card. But nevertheless, like we said, it does seem a little bit situational, and it does on paper have some uses. But I think overall, for the time being, it's just a little bit shy of I think slipping really into a good deck in the current metagame. Alright guys, so coming in at the number 10 spot is going to be a new GX, going to be Greninja GX, a new Stage 2 Pokemon GX that we're getting from Forbidden Light. Has this ability, sure it can flurry whenever you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn. You may put 3 damage counters on one of your Pokemon, very similar to the old Crobat that we had back from Phantom Forces. Its first attack is Haze Slash for a Water and Double Colorless Energy, does 110, and you may shuffle this Pokemon and all cards attached to it back into your deck. And then its GX attack for the same energy cost is Shadowy Hunter GX, and it does 130 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So this is a card we've actually already started messing around with on the channel. We've done a couple different deck ideas with this. But Greninja definitely seems kind of neat. Like I said, very similar to the Crobat from back in the day, which saw a lot of play. It also helps that the Frogadier from Forbidden Light has a similar ability that places 2 damage counters. So like I said, very similar to that old Crobat evolution line, which saw play. So I think that kind of sets up Greninja to at least be half decent, since we can at least refer back to the Crobat line as a reference point to kind of gauge how good this card might be. But I don't know about you guys, but I have a few hesitations about Greninja GX, though. Before I get too deep into that,
I want to hear what you have to say.
Okay, that's fine. But yeah, a couple things. The big thing for me, just right out of the gate, is looking at its retreat cost. Doesn't seem like a big deal, but the fact that it has 2 retreat is actually really annoying, especially when you think about Greninja as a Pokemon. It's a very fast Pokemon, and like it normally has like a 1 retreat or 0 retreat cost in the card game. So it's weird that it has a 2 retreat, and it just makes the card a little bit clunky, which I don't like.
That's a little awkward.
What's that? I'm sorry?
I said it's a little awkward.
Yeah, definitely so. Especially when you look back at Crobat, which had free retreat. It's easy to get a little bit bummed out looking at Greninja by comparison. And also, Crobat came out in a much different format where, typically the biggest Pokemon at the time were 180 hit points, and of course a couple of Mega Pokemon at the time had around 210. But generally speaking, 180 hit points was kind of the average max amount of hit points. So the fact that we're still doing the same amount of damage with the Greninja line as the Crobat line is a little bit underwhelming. I kind of would have liked to have seen this ability get a little bit of a buff, but I mean, those are kind of my big reservations. I'm not sure if the ability is strong enough to actually make Greninja a top-tier archetype. I definitely think this card has a ton of potential. Xander, I know you had some thoughts on this. You've also done a little bit of testing with the card.
And I have done a article which you can find on Rare Candy's Patreon about 4 different decks. But I think Greninja GX is really cool. It's just like you can obviously tell where the card's gonna go because Golbat and Crobat were very good. They were in a number of different decks back in the day. But these have the option of attacking as well. They have really good attack costs just for Water DCE. So that's something you can power up in 2 turns, or even 1 turn if you're really wanting to play Aqua Patch. The things that lead me to be confused about where to put Greninja and why I think it's at 10 is because if you want to be attacking with Greninja, you want to be rare candying into Greninja. You don't really want to rare candy into Greninja because you kind of want to get the bonus from Frogadier. Then if you're Frogadiering into Greninja, then you're a turn behind, and it's kind of hard to chain attacks. But that's playing devil's advocate. I think the card is sick. Being able to search Froakie off of Brooklet Hill is really nice right now. Froakie also has fake free flight, where if you attach a water energy to it, you can get free retreat, so that's good in a number of situations.
Well, also, too, it's worth mentioning, I think all 3 Froakies right now that we have all have potential, because we have the one like you mentioned, the 50 HP one has the ability that gives it a lower cost if you have energy attached to it. We have the old one from Breakpoint that does paralysis on a coin flip. And then we have the new 70 hit point one, which Buzzwole doesn't KO quite as easily. So we have a pretty big pool of good pre-evolutions for Greninja, so which is kind of nice.
Yeah, but I mean, either way, I think, like you said, the math is still a little bit awkward. Like, when I was doing in the article, I basically did every combination of math that you could have with, like, Zoroark Greninja. So, Choice Band plus Ride Speeding plus Frogadier, stuff like that. and how it adds up. And to get to 210 in one turn, you have to do a lot. And if I'm going to want to do 210 with a Greninja, I could just as easily put a Vikavolt on the table and attach a Choice Band to my Tapu Bulu GX and one-shot them with Nature's Judgment. Like, there are a lot of things that are much easier to do that kind of ridiculous damage than trying to set up a really big combo with Greninja GX. But I do just think the card is really strong. Hazy Slash is really underrated. Just being able to shuffle it back into the deck, you can take a hit with 230 HP, probably not die, and then get rid of it so they can't take the prizes. Also, it lets you get back that Frogadier and Greninja at a later turn to re-put them down. So I definitely think Greninja GX is good. It's like, we know where it will be good. It's just what it will be good and how soon it'll be good.
Looking at expanded, we actually have like Dive Ball as well. So if you were to use that attack to shuffle in the Greninja and all of the pieces, you can Dive Ball for them back to use those Frogadier and Greninja abilities. So.
Yeah, and just in general, too, there's a ton of water support. I think Xander already briefly mentioned Brookwood Hill. Like you said, Kenneth, and Expanded, we have Dive Ball. We also have Splash Energy, which I actually think is a little bit underrated because it does allow you to reuse those abilities whenever your Greninja GXs get knocked out. And the card is just really flexible, which I think is one reason it did make our top 10. Like I said, I think we have some reservations, but the ability is definitely cool. We've seen it in the past. Like I said, it's historically been good. And it's just, the attack costs are pretty manageable. And it's just generally pretty flexible. Like Xander said, he has an article about 4 different ways right out of the gate you could potentially play this card. Not every card that gets printed, especially even some of the ones on this list, have 4 different ways you can play them. So that's another reason I actually do like Greninja GX too, just because there is a lot of different potential in terms of ways you can build around this card.
There were really like 5 or 6 different ways, but I only wrote about 4 because I think the other ones were just not as great, just not really worth the time to put in the article. But
yeah.
It's definitely a card that I would not be surprised to see do well at any time that it's in Standard.
For sure. So next up at number 9, we have yet another Pokemon GX. That's going to be the new Zygarde GX. So Zygarde's going to be a 200 hit point basic GX from Forbidden Light. It has 3 attacks that we're going to talk about. First of which is going to be Cell Connector for just a DCE, does 50 damage, and you attach 2 fighting energy from your discard pile to this Pokemon. Its next attack, Land's Wrath, for 2 fighting and a DCE does 130, and then again for the same attack cost you have Verdict GX for 150 damage, and you prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from Pokemon GX and EX during your opponent's next turn. So no shortage of fighting support in this set. That's actually one thing, just in general, I think is one of the highlights of Forbidden Light. Just a lot of cool new cards have gotten added to the card pool for fighting decks to potentially make use of. And Zygarde definitely seems like a pretty good card. I've messed around a little bit with it so far. I actually posted a bit of that on the channel as well. Definitely go check that out if you have not already seen the deck I posted with this. But yeah, so Zygarde, it's kind of cool. It powers itself up, and it has this crazy GX attack that makes him basically a Hoopa on your opponent's next turn. And if we're talking about Zygarde GX, we have to mention the new supporter card Bonnie as well that goes hand in hand with this thing. So it's a supporter card, you discard a Stadium in play, but then it allows you to reuse Zygarde's GX attack over and over. So we have Bonnie, we have things like Scorched Earth, Brookwood Hill, the new Diancie Prism Star, which we'll actually get to shortly, Regirock, Strong Energy, all sorts of different ways for fighting Pokemon to get support, which is one reason that I think Zygarde landed on this list. If it did not have all the support that the type has, I wouldn't be nearly as excited about this card. What do you guys think about Zygarde?
I think it's really good. Just the combination of Bonnie Zygarde allowing to chain that GX attack. We break the GX attack rule, being able to attack with it multiple times, and also it has that really nice effect of gaining that EX GX immunity. I think that's just really, really strong. So, and the fact that you have things like Strong Energy, Choice Band, you're getting one-hit KOs on things, and providing yourself that immunity. So it's a very momentum. It's like a very momentum swinging card, I believe.
Definitely. Y'all haven't even said where this card is best yet, because this card is bonkers and expanded. You guys ready to hear this? You one-shot a Zoroark with a DCE if you have Choice Band, Diancie, Regirock, which is really not that bad. You have Fury Belt, so if they want to kill you, they have to do 240, or which is impossible, so they have to hit a Field Blower. And then if they don't kill you, then you have your GX attack, and they have to find Ranger. So you just have a lot of ways to really efficiently deal with Zoroark, and then every other deck in the metagame just can't really beat a Verdict GX, especially if you can just VS Eager for Bonnie. That's just ridiculously good that that deck gains and expanded. I think Zygarde really has a better home and expanded right now with how much EX GX synergies are going on in that format, and Night March kind of not really being in the picture.
Yeah, another thing too, since you're mentioning expanded, just thinking of the numbers you need to hit and expanded. Some of the biggest decks I'd say probably at the time of filming, I'd say are probably Drampagarb, maybe Glaceon, Zoroark, and maybe Toad. I think those are probably some of the big ones, and Zygarde can actually effectively one-shot all of those decks. And they're all pretty GX heavy, outside of maybe Garb if you want to go that route. So Zygarde, like you're saying,
It is just it's just impossible for this deck to lose to Drampagarb. You attach a DCE and then you accelerate 2 fighting to it, and then they're like, what? Righteous Edge, discard your DCE, and you already put 2 fightings on it. Like there's just no way you lose to Drampa. This card is sick and expanded. I'm definitely going to want to do some brews with it.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say if this card didn't have Bonnie, though, it probably wouldn't make our list. I think Buzzwole is generally better without that card, but because we have Bonnie and then the rest of the fighting support, it just kind of pushes Zygarde to being, I think, an interesting archetype. Now, on the flip side, though, I think you also could make the argument, well, is this better than Buzzwole? And Buzzwole also gains some unique support from this set as well, so I'm still not sure which one I prefer. So me personally, that's some of my reservations for Zygarde and why it's maybe a lower pick on the list for me. But I think there's just right out the gate, releasing this card, there's a ton of ways you can really build a deck around this to make it a force to be reckoned with. So next up at the number 8 spot, yet another GX already on this countdown. We have Naganadel GX. So Naganadel is actually going to be our first evolution-based Ultra Beast that we've gotten so far. And it has 3 attacks, the first of which is going to be Beast Raid for just a single colorless energy. It has 20 times the amount of Ultra Beast in play. Jet Needle for a Psychic and DCE does 110, and it goes through weakness and resistance. And then its GX attack, Stinger GX for 3 colorless. Both players shuffle their prizes into their deck, and then they set the top 3 cards of each of their decks face down as their prize cards. So this card's pretty crazy. This is actually probably one of my favorite cards, and probably one of the ones I'm most eager to test out, just because I think there's a lot of really fun ways we can build around this. But I know Xander has a lot of strong thoughts on this card, so I'm going to let him kind of take the reins right out the gate with this one.
Yeah, I love this card. This is such an enabler for every single Ultra Beast that's in existence, and even the ones that we're going to get, because more Ultra Beasts came out in the Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, so we're going to get 3 or 4 more within the next few sets. So I'm sure that any of them can be really partnered with this. Having a single colorless attack that can do easily 80 to 120 2 shots most of the metagame, and is just really good on its own while having 210 HP. And then you also get Ultra Space, which is just kind of Brooklet Hill for a Ultra Beast, except it goes to your hand, which also searches for Naganadel GX, which is really relevant. So that's just a super good card to help you set up your board. Didn't make the top 10, but still just really great to mention. But I think that just because of the first attack just being colorless, you enable it to work with all of your Ultra Beasts. And there are just a lot of really good Ultra Beasts out right now to make it work with. The obvious one is Buzzwole, but then beyond that, Ultra Necrozma is an Ultra Beast that you can use things like Beast Ring and Max Elixir. Duskmane Necrozma is also an Ultra Beast, and then Xurkitree GX is also an Ultra Beast. And all of these are really good cards that, with the power of things like Beast Ring, which we'll talk about much later, but just there's a lot of really good ways to power up all these other Ultra Beasts, and Naganadel gives you something to do during those early turns of the game to be 2-shotting back and forth while you're setting up your bigger attackers.
Yeah, and another reason why I like this too, in combination with Buzzwole, just as an example too, is because you have a nice way to cover your weakness as well for like the mirror match and stuff like that. So you're good against other Buzzwole variants. You can easily knock out things that counter your Buzzwoles. But overall, I like this card, even in expanded too. I think there's some potential there since we have access to things like both Skyfield and Dimension Valley. They both have a lot of synergy with Naganadel GX. So like between both formats and the number of Ultra Beasts that we have access to, I just think there's just so many different ways we can build around this card, and it's one of my most eager ones to actually sit down and finally test with. I know, Xander, you've already done a little bit of testing on the channel with this card, and it's been really fun based on the games that I saw that we uploaded with it, so I'm just really amped for this thing. So next up at the number 7 spot, we have actually our first non-Pokemon GX of the list. And that's going to be yet another Ultra Beast, though. It's going to be a new Buzzwole card. So Buzzwole is a non-GX Ultra Beast, and it has this attack called Sledgehammer for just a single fighting energy. It does 30 plus 90 more if your opponent has exactly 4 prize cards remaining. Then it has another attack called Swing Around for 2 fighting and a colorless. You flip 2 coins, and the attack is 80 plus 20 more for each heads. So this is a card I think a lot of people have been excited about. One of the new cards that gives, I think, fighting decks a little bit more support. And we're mainly going to be focusing on Sledgehammer here. I think that's the attack that really has most people excited for this card. So, you know, I could definitely see this easily slipping in as a one-of in Buzzwole decks. And one thing I've kind of seen in a lot of Buzzwole matches, like as far as the mirror match goes, a lot of times whoever gets that first Absorption GX on a Buzzwole usually is in a good position to win the game a lot of the time. And having a card like this that can just immediately swing the tempo of the game back in your favor, I think is really, really strong. Especially also too, if you are playing a Buzzwole deck and your opponent hits you with like a Mew EX or something like that, you have a way to just immediately respond to that now. So I think this card really, you know, it seems very situational, but I think it's really, really good just for this first attack alone.
I just did the math in my head, and the baby Buzzwole can knock out a regular Buzzwole in one shot. Strong choice, Diancie. That's ridiculous. That's so good. Go ahead, Kenneth. But I was just like, wow, that math is insane.
So while the damage boost from Sledgehammer is really good, it's worth noting that it does 30 base damage before that 90 for a single energy. So that means you can either go the Beast Energy and one-shot a Hoopa, or you can or you have like Strong Energy, Regirock, that one-shots Hoopa as well. It's also just like really good. Like you think about how centric like Zoroark is right now, and it's just a really good one prize attacker that just puts like a lot of pressure against Zoroark. So yeah, I really just think Hoopa or Buzzwole being really good against Hoopa and Zoroark decks. So yeah,
this card
it's just really worth noting that it does 30 base damage even before the modifier of the plus 90.
This card is just so awkward to play around. Like you're just probably gonna have to just eat a knockout from it, because what's gonna happen is if you're playing Zoroark, if you take your first knockout with a Zoroark or a Mew, they just get knocked out because you're at 4 prizes, they kill it, and in the meantime they're probably beast ringing and they're doing something crazy. But if you take a knockout on a non-GX Pokemon to put yourself at 5 prizes, then kill a GX Pokemon so you're at 3 prizes, the baby Buzzwole doesn't do anything, but they just don't need to put any more non-GX Pokemon on the board other than an Octillery. So you're forced to kind of go out of your way to put yourself back on even prizes and then get your last 2. So just the existence of this card and the possibility that at any moment they could just float down their active, retreat into this, and knock out your Zoroark or your Mew is just going to put strike fear in the hearts of men with this card. Like, it's very good.
Well, also, too, I think another underrated aspect is the amount of HP that has 130, which is actually pretty important because that means Zoroark GX actually can't knock it out without the help of something like a Professor Kukui. So
or a Frogadier.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. So I think just that alone makes the card a little bit better as well. Like, I mean, if you're playing Buzzwole, you're probably already beating Zoroark as it is, but you definitely have really good insurance thanks to this card as well. But like you're saying too, it kind of forces your opponent to either, you know, target down this little one prize Pokemon or like try to play around it. It just makes your opponent play awkwardly, which is you know, kind of what you're saying, Xander. And I think that's definitely another kind of underrated aspect of the card, is just the existence of it and what it threatens.
Another thing is that you do not get knocked out by a Evolution's Mewtwo. They do 80 to you. So if you have a Guzma, they're still on 4 prizes. So you can Guzma up another Zoroark or something and take a knockout on it just with your baby Buzzwole. It's a ridiculously good card.
And another thing too is we mentioned Beast Ring, which we'll get to more of that later in this countdown. But another thing too is even if they knock out the Buzzwole, they're still at 3 prizes, which means you still have access to Beast Ring, even though they took out this little guy. So just an absolutely crazy card. It seems very situational, I think, at first glance to a lot of people, but I definitely think people should not be sleeping on this card. Definitely, I think one of the better cards to come out of the set, obviously, since it made our number 7. So coming in at the number 6 spot is actually going to be our first Prism Star card of the countdown. That's going to be the new Beast Energy Prism Star. So by default, it does provide a colorless energy, but while it's attached to an Ultra Beast, it provides every type of energy, but only provides 1 energy at a time. But then the attacks of the Ultra Beast this card is attached to do 30 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon before applying weakness and resistance. So just when you think Buzzwole was running out of new tricks it could gain, it gains this thing. This card is, oh, it's so dumb in a good way, in a good and bad way probably. I think the main Pokemon people are really thinking about with this card is Buzzwole, because with Jet Punch you're doing 30 base damage, but with a Beast Energy you're doing 60, which knocks out the majority of the pre-evolutions that are in the game, like your Froakies, your Ralts, etc. So Beast Energy, definitely a super good card. What do you guys think about this one?
The only bad thing I can say about it is that since it's a Prism Star, you can only play 1, so you can't really rely on it for all of your math. It's just like, you obviously put it into your deck. It's a great card. There's no reason not to, but it's not something that you can say, oh, well, I have Beast Energy, so I beat a certain matchup. It's not like you have any search for a Prism Star, and it's a special energy, so you don't really have any ways to get it out of your deck. That's kind of why I think it's lower. Like, it's just a phenomenal card. Noah's not going to tell you that, but the struggle is going to be, you can't rely on it for situations that you are just assuming that you're going to have it, because since it's just a singleton card, you won't. And then even when you do get it, if you get it too early, like if you get it as your first energy, you don't really want to discard it, so they might just enhance hammer it away, something like that. So the card's very good. I just think the inconsistent nature of only having a one-of that you can't search for makes it not as great.
Nor can you recover it, because it actually goes into the lost zone, so you couldn't play something like a special charge to recover it.
That is true. I think it's definitely inherently a win more card, but unlike a lot of types of like win more types of cards we've seen, this is one that easily just slides into your deck. You just change a strong energy or like a basic fighting over to this thing. It easily fits into your deck, and just there's basically very little downside to playing this thing. Like you said, you can't rely on it to be like an integral core part of your strategy, but along with Choice Band, along with Strong Energy, Diancie Prism Star, Regirock EX, it's just yet another damage modifier that we gain for Buzzwole. And, we've kind of been centering the conversation a little bit around Buzzwole, but again, it's for any Ultra Beast, so even things like the new Naganadel GX that we just mentioned, you will be able to increase your damage with that. Also, things like Ultra Necrozma, not that you need to really increase your damage with that card, but, it will apply for every Ultra Beast, so that's another reason why it's pretty good. Pretty straightforward card, though. Not too much to really say. It's just kind of just blatantly good and fits into your Ultra Beast decks. Alright guys, we are halfway through the countdown. We are at number 5, and that is going to be yet another Pokemon GX. This is going to be Ultra Necrozma GX. So it is an Ultra Beast, like I mentioned, so it will have access to things like Ultra Space or the Beast Energy Prism Star we just went over. Just something to make a note of. But its first attack, Photon Geyser, for a Psychic Energy and Metal Energy. You discard all basic Psychic Energy from this Pokemon, and this attack does 80 more damage for each card you discarded in this way. And then its GX attack, Sky Scorching Light GX, for the same attack cost. You can only use this attack if the total amount of prize cards in play is 6 or less, but then you put 6 damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon. So just right away, the card that everyone has kind of been talking about, this reminds them of, is the old Rayquaza EX back from Dragons Exalted, kind of just brought back and buffed up a little bit for today's format. And if you guys are unfamiliar with Rayquaza EX, very similar first attack, and it saw a ton of play when it was released. It was probably tier 1 for probably a set or so before falling out of favor, but definitely a super good card we had before, and now it's back in a little bit better since we have the new Malamar, which we'll get to a little bit later in this countdown as well. And there's just all sorts of ways I think we can actually power this thing up with. But I think Malamar is going to be kind of at the center of that discussion. So this is actually a card I really, really like. I've been testing with it a little bit, and it's been pretty good so far. Do you guys, how do you feel about Ultra Necrozma here?
I'm a little bit underwhelmed, if you want to be honest. I think that I don't want to talk about Malamar too much, but it's kind of really hard to talk about Ultra Necrozma without talking about Malamar.
Oh, of
But
course.
I think that these decks are really going to be limited until rotation, where we lose Parallel City. Because if you Parallel City the Malamar player and then you Guzma and you knock out a Malamar on the same turn, they're left with two bench Pokemon, possibly having to had to discard a Malamar because of the Parallel City, and you've knocked out a Malamar. And I think also that even without Parallel City in part of the equation, Zoroark might just be able to Guzma and Bloodthirsty Eyes the Inkays and Malamars enough that the Ultra Necrozma player might struggle getting out energies and consistently attacking. I do think that there is a hypothetical deck where you play this with Naganadel GX and you play both Max Elixirs and Beast Ring, just so that while you're sitting there two-shotting things at first, you can power up an Ultra Necrozma and just come up and sweep. And don't underestimate the GX attack. I slept on it, and then I watched the VOD of the Japanese tournament that just happened, where 2016 world champion Shintaro Ito used the GX attack to knock out two basics, and I think it was kind of a mirror match. So that attack can have some random surprise uses and force your opponent to like maybe not bench a Zorua that they wanted to evolve into another Zoroark GX, stuff like that. But I think the card is all right. I wouldn't be surprised to see it do well, but it's not one of the first things that I personally would be wanting to play. But I'm a little skeptical of it. I can definitely see it. Other people kind of doing well with it.
Yeah, and I think, like you said about Parallel City, for example, I think the two big challenges that this card has is going to be Ability Lock and Parallel City. Right now, in standard format, Garbodor is pretty popular, whether it's with Buzzwole or like Espeon, which is kind of a problem for this deck. Also, the Trash Range Garbodor is kind of a problem for this deck in my experience as well, and Parallel City, which is in so many decks. Honestly, I think if some of these factors weren't in play, this would probably be within maybe my top 3 cards. But I think because of certain cards currently seeing play in the metagame, I think that will bump this Necrozma down. Like I said, kind of here to the number 5 spot. But it's just a huge beat stick. It just nukes everything in its way. Like Xander said, you can build around Beast Ring and Max Elixir. Of course, Malamar. I think even Metagross is definitely a potential option as well. So lots of different ways to get this guy up and running. And being able to just take huge one-hit knockouts is usually a good thing. So that's why I'm so excited about this card.
Another card we didn't say was Lunala Prism Star. That can definitely be something to help you accelerate in standard without having to worry about your bench space. But, dang it, I had a thought, but I lost it. Kenneth, you go ahead and take it.
So, I'm a little underwhelmed that it is limited to just discarding Psychic Energy instead of having the option of discarding Psychic or Metal, like the old Rayquaza EX discarding all Fire or all Lightning, because in Expanded you have Bronzong. So with Bronzong, I feel like you just probably have just another range of like partners, of other attackers that you could accelerate with Bronzong and kind of make it more like a metal deck. So it's kind of a little underwhelming that it limits it to only discarding Psychic Energy. So I don't know. I feel like they probably could have done that, but what are we gonna do?
It is what it is. Like I said, though, I think just being able to just take huge one-hit knockouts. Let's just break down the math real quick for it. If you discard 1 energy, you're hitting for 100. If you're discarding 2, you're hitting for 180, or more importantly, 210 if you have a Choice Band or Beast Energy Prism Star. And then from there, you basically just keep nuking everything else, even stage 2s. So
that is one thing that's nice about the math. So let's go back to that Parallel City equation that I said before. If you let's say that you attack with Ultra Necrozma, because presumably it's active, which is why they had to Guzma knock out a Malamar. You still have the metal energy on it. So if you still have one Malamar in play, you can attach a Psychic from your hand, and then use the ability to attach an energy from the discard pile, and then if you still have the Choice Band, you still knock out the Zoroark. So even though I do think that there are factors that could go wrong, like a really bad Parallel City and knockout situation, whatever, the card definitely is strong. I know that I'm playing Devil's Advocate, but the card's obviously good.
For sure. I expect this to be whether or not it's the most successful, I definitely expect it to be one of the most played new cards that we see come out of this set. Alright guys, so coming in at number 4 we have yet another Prism Star card. This is going to be the new Diancie Prism Star. So, much like the other Prism Star cards, you can only play one of these in your deck, and when it gets knocked out, it does go into the lost, or discarded, I should say. But it's 120 hit point basic, has this ability, Princess's Cheers. As long as this Pokemon is on your bench, your fighting Pokemon's attacks do 20 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. Has an attack, not too relevant, we're basically just talking about this card solely for the ability. And you have to ask, is doing 20 extra damage really worth this card being at number 4 on the list? And I would definitely say it is. Just because if you look at fighting just as a type, like we've kind of mentioned throughout this countdown, there's just so much support and so many different damage modifiers to help you hit one-hit knockouts. So with Buzzwole, you have like Choice Band, Strong Energy, Beast Energy, Diancie, Regirock. So you can see how all this stuff starts to add up.
Card's great. It's really so good.
It's that simple. It's just that
so,
good.
Like, fighting type decks were already willing to play 2 Regirock to do 20 damage, and now I don't have to play 2 3-retreat bad EX Pokemon, and I can play 1 Prism Star that I can still get off Brooklet Hill and get the same effect. The card is just, it's so deceivingly good. Like, you're never gonna have enough time to knock it out. You're just gonna have to sit there and deal with it. And it can just run through your whole board. The card is sick. Also, one not Buzzwole deck that this is good in is Passimian. It boosts the damage of all fighting Pokemon, so it lets you knock out Gardevoir GX in one shot. And there are a few other things that also become relevant, just some random like factors. I think you also knock out like a Golisopod that used Armor Press, which has occasionally been an issue. But just like all the fighting type support, we've always been saying Buzzwole, 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 but don't forget there are other cards out there that this is good with. And it's just discussing how good 20 damage is.
I was also going to mention too Lucario GX, because now with Diancie you can actually one-shot a Buzzwole GX or a Duskmane Necrozma GX with a Strong Energy, Choice Band, Diancie. So I think that's another thing worth mentioning. I think the Regirock was only kind of good in certain situations, but now that we have the Diancie, I think that just easily replaces Regirock for decks that want to run Lucario GX.
Well, 2 sub-points. I don't know if you completely replace Regirock. I know that if you're playing more than 1 Regirock, you just cut 1 for sure for this.
Well, it depends on the variant. Like, if you're playing Buzzwole, you probably still play 1 of each. But I'm just saying, and maybe like Zoroark Lucario GX.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The notable thing that you said about the Lucario math to knock out a Buzzwole is you could do it before, but now you don't have to have Kukui to do it. Correct. So you can dig with a draw supporter to get the 190, which is very relevant.
But yeah, overall, guys, a pretty straightforward card. Bunch of different Pokemon in the current format that can really make use of this. So definitely expect to see Diancie Prism Star pop up and see some play. Alright guys, next up at the number 3 spot, we have the new Malamar card. We briefly kind of mentioned this when talking about Ultra Necrozma, but let's go over it a little bit more in depth. So it has this ability, Psychic Recharge. Once during your turn before you attack, you may attach a Psychic Energy from your discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon. So this is really the only reason we're talking about this card. The attack is pretty bad. But basically, it's kind of like the old Electric from back in the day, or the old Bronzong, but now we have a form of Psychic Energy acceleration from the discard. Kind of helps make the whole Malamar Necrozma archetype work, and that's actually one reason why this card is actually placed higher than Ultra Necrozma, just because it kind of wants this card to function. But I think there's also some other uses for this card, even outside of the Ultra Necrozma style deck. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I remember that like there was a short period that Night March and Vespiquen played Bronzong in the list also, so that you could accelerate without having to use a double colorless. I don't think there are any archetypes that are sitting here like begging for that role to happen, because with Special Charge and Puzzles and Standard, you can kind of get away with not worrying about it. But one of the things that I do think that Malamar enables is a lot of other really good Psychic attackers that are in Standard. Necrozma GX is still in Standard, and I think it might be better than Ultra Necrozma because the math kind of checks out the same way, but you don't have to worry about running 2 different types of energies. You can just run straight Psychics and not really worry about it. And Black Ray is also really good because you can just Black Ray and set up your math so that you have stuff ready for the whole game. Also, Damage Change Mewtwo is still in Standard with Scattershot, 30 times the number of Psychic energies attached to your Pokemon. So if you do something like Black Ray, you can just scatter shot and hit them for 90 and knock them out. Even versus Zoroarks that you don't Black Ray against, they ride as beating you, and then you damage change it all back. So you kind of get a max potion out of the deal, and you do 120 with it, or probably 120, 150. So there are definitely some other really cool Pokemon that you can run with Malamar. I remember I didn't have the list with me, but I was talking with one of my friends, one of Kenneth and I's friends, Zachary Duncan, and we made a list of like 15 psychic Pokemon that all benefit from Malamar's existence, and that's just psychic Pokemon. I'm sure that there's colorless Pokemon out there somewhere that would just enjoy some energy acceleration back in standard that works for everything that this could definitely work well with.
Yeah, just off the top of my head, I know that there's a few psychic Pokemon that really come to mind for me. There's, of course, the Wobbuffet that we still have in Standard, which actually partners really nicely with Necrozma GX after you use Black Ray. Fun little fact there. But we also have the Fates Collide Mew, we have the Mimikyu, so a couple of cool little tech Pokemon that you could potentially make use of. We also have, of course, Dawnwink's Necrozma GX, the Lunala Prism Star that Xander mentioned even earlier. So definitely no shortage of psychic Pokemon that I think have really been begging for a way to effectively get powered up for some time now, and Malamar I think really is going to help enable that. There's just so many good cards in the current card pool that would love a form of energy acceleration like this.
All these top cards have just been so, like, they're linear, but I don't think linear at all does not mean bad. Linear could just mean this card does one thing, but it does that one thing really well, whereas the first few that we talked to, they had a few different roles. Just being able to put an energy into play from your discard pile has been printed 3 times, Electric, Bronzong, and Malamar, and every one of them has had a Tier 1 or Tier 2 deck tied to that name every time. So don't expect Malamars to be anything worse than those two. Even if it's not now, it'll be eventually after Parallel City's gone, kind of like what we were talking about. The card's great. There's definitely a ton of partners that it can work with, and just never forget that extra energies is always good.
Yeah, any card that allows you to inherently break a rule of the game, such as like the single energy attachment, is usually always worth looking at. And like you said, Xander, historically this ability has been good, even going as far as all the way back to the Blaziken, back from like Ruby Sapphire, which was a stage 2. So these abilities have historically done great things, and with the current card pool of, you know, good psychic attackers, or psychic energy based attackers I should say, I definitely see no reason why Malamar won't be a good card. So coming in at the number 2 spot, guys, we have actually a card that goes very nicely with that Malamar that we just discussed. It's going to be the new Mysterious Treasure card. So it's an item card. You get to discard a card from your hand. If you do, search your deck for a Psychic or Dragon Pokemon, reveal it, and put it into your hand. So this is kind of like an Ultra Ball on steroids a little bit for Psychic and Dragon Pokemon. So you can kind of see what Pokemon is trying to do with this whole Forbidden Light set. They're giving us the Ultra Necrozma, which is Dragon type. They're giving us the Malamar, which is Psychic type. Then we have this Mysterious Treasure as well, which kind of helps power up the whole engine of the deck alongside Ultra Ball. So the fact that there's so many good cards that Mysterious Treasure can search out, including Tapu Lele GX, which is super important to note, I think really sets this card up to be you know, something really special. Ultra Ball is a 4 of in like every deck right now, so the fact that we have a card that's basically an upgrade to Ultra Ball for certain archetypes is pretty huge. I've kind of gushed about this card a lot in some of the other videos that we've done here, so I'll let you guys talk a little bit more about this one. What are your thoughts on the old Mysterious Treasure?
So one of my favorite decks for this card is actually in Expanded is Trevenant, because in Trevenant before Mysterious Treasure you ran Jirachi EX because you also ran Level Ball. Now you don't necessarily need to run Jirachi, and you could just play 2 Tapu Lele and a couple Mysterious Treasure, and that just provides the deck a huge consistency boost, which, you know, when you're playing Trevenant, you need to get out that turn 1 Trevenant. So being able to be just that more consistent is just great, and Mysterious Treasure does that job very well.
I think Mysterious Treasure will see play just to get Tapu Lele GX. I made a list for Ho-Oh Kiawe that had 2 of those in it instead of, I think, Nest Balls or something else that I was running, just so that you have even more outs to get a turn 1 Kiawe. And I think that there are other decks in the future that might do something similar. Maybe not relying on Kiawe, of course, but just using Tapu Lele is such a powerful ability to get any supporter that you need, and considering you only discard 1 card for it, it's just so strong and kind of ridiculous. every deck has played 4 Ultra Ball except things that have special type support like Dive Ball, and then now every Psychic deck is just going to be running this. It's bonkers.
Alright guys, so coming in at the #1 spot of our top 10 Forbidden Light cards, it's a card we've actually mentioned a few times so far on this list, and that's going to be the new Beast Ring card. So it's an item card, and you can only play this card if your opponent has exactly 3 or 4 prize cards remaining. But then you search your deck for up to 2 basic energy cards and attach them to one of your Ultra Beasts, then shuffle your deck. So, yet again, we have more cards that help Buzzwole do Buzzwole stuff. This card is just so ridiculously aggressive and can help swing the tempo of games. It's absolutely absurd. I know probably you guys have played around with this card a little bit more than me, so yet again, I'm going to let y'all take the lead on this one and maybe share some of your insights about this one.
This card is just kind of like how I was talking about Naganadel as an enabler. This card is like the enabler for the enabler. I think that Naganadel would be good without Beast Ring, but this card allows those Ultra Beast straight decks just to be phenomenal. You can power up so many attackers so fast. All the ones that I mentioned before with Naganadel, I can just say them again. The Buzzwole, Xurkitree, Ultra Necrozma, and Duskmane Necrozma. If they knock out the Naganadel GX, you just... Even if you hit 1, like 1 is all you need just to put yourself at such a powerful spot. And even if they knock the 1 out in return, you still have things like Naganadel to fall back on. Also, a lot of Japanese lists for Buzzwole Lycanroc kind of split their counts of Max Elixirs in this to like a 2-2, just because you don't need that super aggressive Max Elixir start out of the gate. So this allows you to not commit so many energies to the board, because Max Elixir was kind of a, you play it when you see it most of the time type card. This card, you don't immediately have to play it down. Like, you do have a time frame where you need to, but you don't force yourself into positions where they can just kill the thing with energy on it, because if they kill the thing with energy on it, they put themselves to 4 prizes probably, and then you just play the Beast Ring down now. So I definitely think the card is strong. There's even just random Zoroark decks that you could just stick Ultra Beast, a few basic energies, and Beast Ring in, just because you have that trade outlet to just draw a ton of cards, and then on the turn that they go to 4 prizes, you just Beast Ring onto whatever attacker is left. So I definitely think that Beast Ring in both formats, expanded is probably even better, because you have things like Trainer's Mail and Acrobike, just so you can dig even deeper to get Beast Ring. But just what I was saying, it's just such a powerful, ridiculous card that as an item, you get to search 2 energies from your deck. It's like with Vikavolt, how I've talked with Kenneth a lot, it kind of feels like sometimes when they get the Vikavolt out, they just can't lose the game. Now they don't even need to get a stage 2 out, and their opponent just needs to do what they were going to do anyway, which is knock out your Pokemon, and you just get to play down cards to get energies from your deck, which is crazy underrated. You don't have to have them in your hand, don't have them in your discard pile already. You just get to search them from your deck to put it into play. So the card, there's a reason it's the #1 on the set. It is going to be in Tier 1 decks for the entire time it is in Standard, and pick up your playset as soon as possible, because they are just going to keep going up. Because it's a rare, it's ridiculous that it's a rare.
Yeah, the last time that we saw a rare trainer card was Getsis out of Plasma Freeze, so something that definitely doesn't come up very often.
Yeah, especially too since the Japanese actually don't have rares. Their rares are just their hollows. So it's kind of a weird decision by Pokemon, but it's definitely worthy of being rare in terms of how good it is. And one thing that's also worth mentioning too is you have to think, people play 4 copies of Max Elixir, a card that doesn't even work every time you play it, and only gets you 1 energy. So put that in comparison with Beast Ring. Granted, of course, they do have to have 3 or 4 prize cards remaining, but in theory, you can get 8 energy out in 1 turn, not counting your manual attachment for the turn. Now, to be fair, that doesn't always happen and probably won't many times, but the potential is there to just go absolutely crazy and punish your opponent so hard for taking a knockout. And especially, I could even maybe, I could see the existence of this card maybe forcing your opponent to play a little bit more carefully, like do I really want to take this easy knockout on this bench sitter? Because then that would activate Beast Ring. So maybe I should just, think about just softening up this Buzzwole that's right in front of me, just as an example. This card is just absolutely super crazy strong, and definitely was definitely in top contention to be at the top of this list. We did rearrange a few cards in this list from how we originally discussed it, but Beast Ring was kind of always there near the top. So definitely a crazy card to come out of Forbidden Light for sure.
The scariest thing about Beast Ring is that we don't even know what the new Ultra Beasts are going to do. That I mentioned whenever we talked about Naganadel GX. They could just be something that just lets you go crazy with Beast Ring even more. So then you'll have Buzzwole whenever new card comes out. And obviously, we can't just say, oh, new cards could come out, so this could be good, because that's kind of how it is for anything. But they obviously like Ultra Beasts with the amount of Ultra Beast stuff that we're getting. So I wouldn't be surprised if at least one of those Ultra Beasts is good, and Beast Ring makes another appearance in a really strong deck.
Yeah, it's just going to be a card you're going to have to keep your eye out for no matter what, as long as it's in format with other good Ultra Beasts like Buzzwole, Naganadel, or any of the others that could potentially come out in the future. But yeah, so Beast Ring is going to take the top spot of our top 10 Forbidden Light cards. What do you guys think of this list? Do you think we ranked anything maybe a little too high, or maybe some things not high enough? Definitely sound off below in the comment section and let us know what you guys think. But as usual, feel free to like and subscribe, and if you can support this channel by becoming a patron over at patreon.com/rarecandytcg, or by picking up something from our online store at rarecandytcg.com, it would mean a lot. But with that, I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you for the next one.